The auctioneer's gavel struck 3 times, and with each blow, Clara Ashford watched her life disappear. Her mother's china, her father's books, the mahogany desk where she'd once managed household accounts for one of Boston's finest families. Everything sold to men who wouldn't meet her eyes. The disgraced daughter of a thief, they whispered, though her father was 6 months dead and couldn't defend his name. 23 years old, orphaned, about to be homeless, Clara stood beneath the awning of Morrison's auction house, her black morning dress soaked through at the hem, and felt the rain wash away the last remnants of who she'd been. The arithmetic was brutal. $150 from the sale, after the auctioneer's fees and her father's debts were settled. Enough for 3 months' rent in a boarding house. Maybe 4 if she was frugal. After that, the choices became unthinkable. Miss Ashford. Mrs. Waverley's voice cut through the sound of rain. Her mother's oldest friend appeared beside her with an umbrella that did nothing to keep either of them dry. You cannot stand here in this weather. Come. Clara allowed herself to be guided to the carriage, though something in her resisted. She needed to see it. Needed to feel the full weight of what her father's choices had cost her. Inside the carriage, Mrs. Waverley produced a wool blanket without asking permission. My daughter Catherine has agreed to take you on as a companion. Room, board, and a small salary. It's not charity, Clara. She genuinely needs help with the children. It was absolutely charity, wrapped in the thinnest veneer of employment. Catherine Waverley Webb had a nanny, a governess, and more servants than she knew what to do with. That's very generous, Clara said carefully, but I cannot accept. What else do you propose to do? Mrs. Waverley's voice hardened. Your father's associates have made it quite clear that no respectable household in Boston will hire you. They blame you for his failures as if you had any hand in his business decisions. Clara pulled the blanket tighter. She'd spent 6 months learning exactly how quickly society could turn. The invitations that stopped coming. The friends who crossed the street to avoid conversation. The whispers that followed her through the market. Embezzler's daughter. Probably knew all along. The whole family rotten to the core. Never mind that her father had died of a heart attack upon discovering his business partner had been systematically stealing from their accounts for years. Never mind that Thomas Ashford had been as much a victim as the investors who lost money. Dead men couldn't defend themselves, and living daughters made convenient targets. I appreciate Catherine's kindness, Clara said, but I will not spend the rest of my life being grateful for scraps from people who pity me. Mrs. Waverley's expression softened, but only slightly. Then what will you do? Clara didn't answer, because the truth was she didn't know. The options available to a well-bred young woman with no money, no family, and a scandalous surname were limited and grim. She could accept charity and spend the rest of her life diminished. A cautionary tale in someone else's household. She could find work in a factory or shop, ruining what was left of her reputation and still barely earning enough to survive. Or she could do what desperate women had done throughout history, marry. Not for love, obviously. No man of her former social standing would touch her now. But there were other options. Weren't there? She'd seen the advertisements in the back pages of newspapers, tucked between offers for patent medicines and farm equipment. Wanted, respectable woman for marriage to established rancher. Must be of good character and willing to relocate west. She'd always thought those advertisements desperate. Almost pathetic. What kind of woman would marry a complete stranger and move halfway across the country? Now, sitting in Mrs. Waverley's carriage with $150 between her and destitution, Clara understood exactly what kind of woman. One who'd run out of choices. There may be another option, she said slowly. Though I'm not certain you'd approve. Mrs. Waverley raised an eyebrow. At this point, child, I'm prepared to hear anything. Clara took a breath. I've been reading the matrimonial advertisements in the Herald. There are men out west, ranchers, business owners, who are looking for wives. Respectable marriages, Mrs. Waverley. Legal and proper. The silence that followed was profound. Mail-order brides, Mrs. Waverley said flatly. You're proposing to become a mail-order bride. I'm proposing to become a wife. The method of introduction is unconventional, but the end result is the same as any arranged marriage. Clara heard the defensiveness in her own voice and hated it. You said yourself that no respectable household in Boston will have me. Perhaps I need to go somewhere my father's name means nothing. Clara, those men could be anyone. Drunkards, brutes, liars. As opposed to the Boston gentlemen who've made it clear they consider me beneath contempt. Clara's voice sharpened. At least these men are honest about their intentions. Mrs. Waverley's mouth thinned. Your mother. My mother is dead. My father is dead. I am alone, Mrs. Waverley, and I will not spend the rest of my life being grateful for charity. The older woman leaned forward, her eyes fierce. Listen to me, Clara Ashford. I understand your pride. I even admire it. But pride doesn't keep you fed. It doesn't put a roof over your head. And it certainly doesn't protect you from men who might see a mail-order bride as something they own rather than someone they marry. The carriage had grown stuffy despite the cold rain outside. Clara felt trapped, cornered by logic and concern she couldn't entirely dismiss. Mrs. Waverley was right about the risks. A man who advertised for a wife might be exactly what his advertisement claimed. Lonely, hardworking, respectable. Or he might be something far worse. And by the time she discovered the truth, she'd be 1,500 miles from anyone who knew her name. But the alternative was a slow grinding down of self. Year after year of gratitude and dependence, watching Catherine's children grow while her own prospects withered. At least out west, she'd be her own person. A wife, yes, but a partner in something. Not a permanent guest in someone else's life. If I may, Clara said quietly, I'd like to see which advertisements seem most promising. I won't respond to anything without thinking it through carefully. Mrs. Waverley sighed. A sound that seemed to carry decades of watching young women make impossible choices. I cannot stop you, but I can insist on this much. Any man you correspond with must provide references. Real references from a bank or a minister. And you will not go anywhere until we've verified those references thoroughly. Agreed. And you'll stay with me until this is settled, one way or another. I'll not have you living in some boarding house while you make decisions that will affect the rest of your life. Clara's throat tightened. Mrs. Waverley, your mother was my dearest friend. She would never forgive me if I abandoned you now, even if I don't approve of your methods. The older woman reached across and squeezed Clara's hand. Just promise me you'll be careful, child. I promise. That evening, in Mrs. Waverley's guest room, Clara spread out a week's worth of newspapers and began reading the matrimonial advertisements with new eyes. Most were immediately dismissible. Too vague, too demanding, or too obviously desperate. Wanted woman for marriage and help with farm. Must be strong and not afraid of hard work. Translation: I need unpaid labor and a warm body. Others were more specific, but somehow worse. Seeking refined lady to grace my home and provide companionship. Must be attractive and well-mannered. That one made her skin crawl. It reminded her too much of Boston society, where women were decorative objects to be displayed and judged. But then, rancher in Eagle Ridge, Montana Territory, seeking wife. I am 34, widowed 2 years, no children. Own 640 acres with cattle and horses. Looking for a woman of good character who wants a fresh start and an honest partnership. I can offer safety, respect, and a fair share in building a life together. If interested, write to James Blackwell, care of Eagle Ridge General Post. Clara read it 3 times, searching for the trick. The hidden demand. The thing that would make it like all the others. But the words remained stubbornly straightforward. No requirements about beauty or refinement. No promises of luxury or romance. Just safety, respect, and partnership. An honest partnership, as if marriage could be something negotiated between equals. She pulled out her writing paper and began a letter she wasn't certain she'd send. Dear Mr. Blackwell, I am writing in response to your advertisement in the Boston Herald. My name is Clara Ashford. I am 23 years old, and I find myself in circumstances that make your offer of a fresh start deeply appealing. She paused, pen hovering over paper. How much honesty was appropriate in a first letter to a potential husband? Too little and she'd be deceiving him. Too much and he'd likely drop her letter in the nearest fire. I should be forthright about my situation. My father recently passed away, leaving considerable debts and some scandal that has made my position in Boston untenable. I have no dowry and no family. What I do have is a good education, reasonable health, and a willingness to work hard at whatever life requires. I am not looking for rescue or romance, Mr. Blackwell. I am looking for exactly what your advertisement suggests. A fair partnership with a man of good character. If you are interested in further correspondence, I would appreciate references from your bank and at least one other person of standing in Eagle Ridge. I hope you'll understand that a woman traveling alone to the frontier must take certain precautions. I await your reply. Respectfully, Clara Ashford. She sealed the letter before she could second-guess herself and placed it on the writing desk. Tomorrow she'd ask Mrs. Waverly to read it. Tomorrow she'd consider whether this was courage or madness. Tonight, she'd sleep knowing she'd taken the first step toward something that was entirely her own choice, for better or worse. The reply came 3 weeks later, forwarded from the boarding house where Clara had briefly stayed before Mrs. Waverly insisted she move in. The envelope was plain but good quality. The handwriting neat and unpracticed. The hand of a man who wrote rarely but carefully. Inside were 3 items: a letter, a reference from the Eagle Ridge Bank and Trust, and a short note from someone named Reverend Samuel Clayton. Clara read the bank reference first. James Blackwell held accounts in good standing, owned his property free and clear, and was considered a man of absolute integrity and reliable judgment. The Reverend's note was more personal. James Blackwell is one of the finest men I know, honest to a fault, hardworking, fair in his dealings with everyone. He lost his wife Rebecca in tragic circumstances 2 years ago and hasn't been the same since. If he's finally ready to move forward, I hope he finds a woman who appreciates what a good man he is. However, I must in good conscience warn you, there are some in town who believe James bears responsibility for Rebecca's death. I do not share this view, but you should know what you're walking into. Clara's heart stuttered. Responsibility for Rebecca's death. She unfolded James Blackwell's letter with trembling fingers. Dear Miss Ashford, thank you for your honest letter. I appreciate a woman who speaks plainly about her circumstances. I'm including the references you requested, and I'll add some plain speaking of my own. I need to tell you something that Reverend Clayton has likely already mentioned in his note. My wife Rebecca died 2 years ago, and there are people in Eagle Ridge who believe I'm responsible. I didn't kill her, Miss Ashford, but I failed to see how much pain she was in, and I wasn't there when she needed me most. She died in childbirth during a blizzard, trying to reach the doctor alone because I was too focused on protecting the cattle. Some say I chose the ranch over my wife. Maybe they're right. I'm not telling you this to gain sympathy. I'm telling you because if you come here, you'll hear the whispers. You'll see people look at me and wonder. And you deserve to know the truth before you make any decision. Here's what I can offer. A house that's solid but plain. Land that's beautiful but demands hard work. A community that's small and has long memories. And a man who will treat you as a full partner in everything we build together, but who carries ghosts. I'm enclosing $100 and a return ticket to Boston, good for 6 months. If you come to Eagle Ridge and decide you've made a mistake, if the whispers are too much, if I'm too much, you can leave. No questions, no judgment. I won't trap you into something you can't bear. But I hope you'll stay. Respectfully, James Blackwell. Clara stared at the money and the train ticket for a long time. He was giving her freedom before he'd even met her, warning her about the worst of himself, offering her escape, trusting her to make an informed choice. She'd expected a rancher looking for convenience. Instead, she'd found a man offering honesty. She tucked the money and ticket into her reticule and began to pack. Mrs. Waverly read both letters, her expression cycling through concern, resignation, and something that might have been grudging approval. He sounds like an honest man, she said finally. That doesn't mean this is wise, Clara. But at least he's not promising you the moon. No, James Blackwell was promising her exactly what she'd asked for. A chance to build something real, even if it started with nothing but mutual need and cautious respect. And ghosts. The train journey took 4 days. Clara spent most of it staring out the window, watching the landscape transform from the familiar greens of the east to the vast open territories of the west. Cities gave way to towns. Towns to settlements. Settlements to nothing but grass and sky stretching endlessly in all directions. She shared a compartment with a young mother heading to her husband's new posting at an army fort. The woman, Ellen, was cheerful and talkative, clearly excited about the adventure ahead. "Montana Territory must be beautiful," Ellen said, bouncing her youngest on her knee. "Wide open spaces, clean air, not like Philadelphia." "Yes," Clara managed. "Different." "Is your husband meeting you in Helena?" "Eagle Ridge, actually." Clara hesitated. "We haven't met yet. It's an arranged marriage." Ellen's eyes widened, not with judgment, but with fascination. "A matrimonial advertisement. How exciting. Is he a rancher?" "Yes. 640 acres." "You must be terrified and thrilled all at once." Terrified was accurate. Thrilled was optimistic. Mostly terrified, Clara admitted. "But that's true of any marriage, isn't it?" Ellen said pragmatically. "My parents arranged my marriage to Thomas. We met twice before the wedding, but we've been married 6 years now, and I wouldn't trade him for anyone." It was a comforting thought, even if Clara wasn't entirely sure she believed it. By the time they reached Helena, Clara's stomach was in knots. She sent the wire to Eagle Ridge as James had instructed. "Arriving tomorrow 3 p.m. Stop. CA." She spent a sleepless night in a hotel room, alternating between determination and panic. She could still use the return ticket, could wire Mrs. Waverly and be back in Boston within the week. But safe and predictable also meant small and diminished. Clara boarded the final train to Eagle Ridge with her suitcase in one hand and her resolve in the other. Eagle Ridge was smaller than she'd imagined. A main street with perhaps a dozen buildings. A church with a white steeple. A general store that seemed to serve as the town's central hub. The train station was barely more than a platform with a small shelter. When Clara stepped down with her suitcase, she was immediately struck by the wind. Cold and sharp, carrying the scent of sage and something else she couldn't identify. Snow, maybe, though the sky was clear. A man stood near a wagon at the edge of the platform. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in canvas work pants and a sheepskin coat. He held his hat in his hands, and even from a distance, Clara could see the tension in his posture. He was as nervous as she was. She walked toward him slowly, giving him time to examine her, to decide if she was what he'd expected. His face was weathered, lined at the eyes and mouth, but his expression was open, guarded, but not closed. He had dark hair that needed cutting, and eyes that were difficult to read from this distance. Brown or hazel, she couldn't tell. "Mr. Blackwell," she said when she was close enough to speak without shouting over the wind. "Miss Ashford." His voice was deeper than she'd expected. Rough from disuse or maybe just from life out here. He looked at her directly, not leering but not avoiding her gaze either. "Assessment, mutual and necessary. You made good time." The trains ran on schedule. Her own voice sounded strange to her ears. Too formal. Too Eastern. He gestured to her suitcase. "Is that all you brought?" "Yes." Everything else had been sold or given away. This suitcase held exactly 3 dresses, 2 work skirts, undergarments, and her mother's jewelry, not valuable but precious. And one other thing carefully wrapped and hidden at the bottom. But she wouldn't think about that yet. He took the suitcase without asking, his hand dwarfing the handle. "Wagons this way. It's about an hour's drive to the ranch. We can talk on the way, or we can ride quiet if you'd rather." Clara appreciated that he'd given her the choice. "Talk, I think. I have questions." "Expected you would." He loaded her suitcase into the wagon bed with an ease that spoke of years of manual labor, then helped her up onto the seat. His hand was calloused, warm through her glove. He released her the moment she was settled. The wagon ride began in silence, the horses moving at a steady pace through terrain that seemed to stretch forever. Mountains rose in the distance, snow-capped and magnificent. Closer, the land rolled in gentle hills covered in grass the color of wheat and earth. "It's beautiful," Clara said, and meant it. "Gets prettier the closer you get to the mountains." Ranch sits in a valley about 5 miles from the foothills. James kept his eyes on the road. Winters are hard, though. Snow can trap you inside for days. He wasn't trying to sell her on the beauty without the reality. She appreciated that. "I should be honest with you, Miss Ashford." James shifted the reins to one hand, his jaw tight. "I'm not good at this. Courting, conversation, any of it. Rebecca and I grew up together. We didn't need words for most things. So if I seem quiet or awkward, it's not because I'm displeased with you. It's just who I am. I'm not expecting poetry, Mr. Blackwell." "Good, because you won't get it." A hint of something, humor maybe, flickered across his expression. "What I can give you is straight talk. So if you have questions, ask them. I'll answer honestly." Clara considered this. In Boston, conversations between men and women followed strict patterns. Dances of implication and suggestion where direct questions were considered rude. But James Blackwell was offering her something different. Plain dealing. "All right," she said. "The Reverend's letter mentioned that some people believe you're responsible for your wife's death. I'd like to hear your version of what happened." James was quiet for a long moment. Clara worried she'd overstepped. But then he spoke, his voice careful but truthful. "February of '82. Worst winter we'd had in a decade. Rebecca was 8 months pregnant. We'd already lost one baby the year before, born too early, didn't survive more than a few hours. This pregnancy seemed to be going better, but Rebecca she wasn't herself. Hadn't been for months." He paused, his knuckles white on the reins. "I thought it was grief from losing the first baby, or fear about losing this one. I didn't realize how deep it went. How dark." Clara's chest tightened, but she stayed silent, waiting. A blizzard hit, lasted 3 days. I was out with the cattle, making sure they had shelter and access to feed. When I came back to the house, Rebecca was gone. She'd walked out into the storm, heading for the doctor in town. 8 miles in a blizzard, 8 months pregnant. His voice cracked slightly. By the time I found her trail and went after her, it was too late. She'd collapsed about 2 miles from the house. I got her back, tried to warm her up, but she went into labor. The baby was breech. I didn't know how to. He stopped, took a breath. They both died, Rebecca and our son, in our bedroom while I held her hand and didn't know how to save her. The grief in his voice was raw, even 2 years later. Some people think I should have been at the house instead of with the cattle. James continued. They're probably right. Others think I drove Rebecca to it, that she was so desperate to get away from me, she'd rather die than stay. I don't know if that's true, but I know I failed her. I didn't see how much pain she was in, and when it mattered most, I wasn't enough. Clara felt something twist in her chest. Not pity, he wouldn't want that, but recognition. She understood what it felt like to fail someone you loved. "Mr. Blackwell," she said quietly, "may I tell you something I haven't told anyone?" He glanced at her, surprised. "All right." "My mother died when I was 17. She'd been ill for months. Something wrong with her heart. The doctors couldn't do much except make her comfortable. But my mother had been a nurse before she married. She taught me things. How to check a pulse, how to recognize symptoms, how to administer certain medicines." Clara's hands twisted in her lap. "The night she died, I was with her. Her breathing changed, became shallow and fast. I knew what it meant, and I panicked. I ran to get my father instead of doing what she'd taught me to do. By the time we came back, she was gone." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I've spent 6 years wondering if I could have saved her, if I'd been braver, calmer, better." James pulled the wagon to a stop right there in the middle of the road, where no houses or people were in sight. He turned to face her fully. Miss Ashford, Clara, you know that's not fair to yourself. You were 17 years old. Terrified. You got help, which is what any rational person would do. And you were trying to save your livelihood in a blizzard, which is what any rational rancher would do, Clara countered. But we both still carry it, don't we? The weight of what we think we should have done differently. Something passed between them. Understanding. Recognition. Two people who'd been slowly erasing themselves under the weight of guilt. Yeah, James said finally. We do. They sat in silence for a moment, the wind whistling around them. Then James picked up the reins again. I need you to understand something before we go any further. The reason I told you about Rebecca, about what people say, it's not just honesty. It's a warning. A warning about what? About what you're walking into. Eagle Ridge is a small town. People talk. And some of them believe this ranch is cursed. 3 families tried to settle this valley before I bought the land. All 3 had tragedies, deaths, fires, financial ruin. Then Rebecca died, and the old-timers started saying the curse was still here. He met her eyes directly. I don't believe in curses, but I do believe in truth. And the truth is, bad things have happened on this land. If you stay, there will be whispers. There will be people who watch you, waiting for the next tragedy. It's not fair, but it's real. Clara absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. Mr. Blackwell? James, if we're going to try this, you should call me James. James, then. She took a breath. I came here because Boston had nothing left for me except judgment and pity. If Eagle Ridge wants to judge me too, at least it'll be for choices I'm making now, not for my father's mistakes. I can live with whispers as long as I'm living my own life. Something shifted in James's expression. Not quite relief, but a softening around the eyes. Then let's talk terms, he said. I'm offering you 3 months to decide if this life suits you. No commitment beyond that. You work the ranch alongside me, see what it's really like. At the end of 3 months, if you want to leave, I'll take you back to Eagle Ridge myself and make sure you get on that train. No hard feelings. And if I want to stay, then we make it official. Real marriage, legal and binding. Partnership that doesn't have an expiration date. It was perhaps the most practical proposal Clara had ever heard. No promises of love. No guarantees of happiness. Just an honest assessment of what they could offer each other. She held out her hand. 3 months. An honest try from both of us. James looked at her extended hand for a moment, then took it. His grip was firm, his palm rough against hers. 3 months. They shook on it like business partners, and somehow, that felt more genuine than any romantic declaration could have. The ranch appeared as they crested a low hill, and Clara's breath caught despite herself. The house was simple single-story, wood frame, painted white with a dark roof, but it sat in a natural basin surrounded by rolling grassland. Behind it, a large barn stood next to several smaller outbuildings. Fence lines stretched in neat rows. It was beautiful and absolutely isolated. There's 3 other ranches within 5 miles, James said, reading her expression. The Callaways to the north, the Carters to the east, and the Wades to the south. Town's got about 200 people if you count the outlying homesteads. Not Boston, but you won't be completely alone out here. I wasn't expecting Boston. Though, if she were being honest, the scope of the emptiness was more than she'd imagined. In Boston, you were never truly alone. Buildings pressed against buildings. People everywhere. Here, space itself seemed to have weight. James pulled the wagon up to the house and set the brake. I should show you inside before it gets dark. We can unload your things after. The interior was as plain as the exterior. Clean but sparse. A main room that served as both kitchen and sitting area, with a cast-iron stove, a large table and 2 chairs. A separate bedroom that James gestured to without entering. That was Rebecca's and mine. I've been sleeping in the second room since she passed. You take the main bedroom. Mr. Blackwell, James, I couldn't. It's bigger and it has the better window. Makes sense for you to have it. His tone left no room for argument. Besides, I'm used to the other room now. He showed her the rest quickly. The second, smaller bedroom. A washroom with a copper tub. A root cellar accessed through a door in the kitchen floor. Everything was functional, well-maintained, but entirely without decoration. No curtains. No racks. No photographs on the walls. It was a house where someone had stopped living and started merely existing. I know it's plain, James said, standing in the main room with his hat in his hands again. Rebecca had plans to fix it up, but then she got sick and after, I couldn't see the point. It's fine, Clara said and meant it. Plain she could work with. Plain was honest. There's something else you should see. James led her to a small chest in the corner of the main bedroom. He opened it carefully, revealing neatly folded clothes, women's clothes, and a few personal items. A hairbrush, cameo brooch, and a leather-bound book. Rebecca's things, James said quietly. I haven't been able to go through them yet, but they're yours now if you want them. The clothes might fit. The book. He hesitated. The book is her journal. I've never read it. Seemed like an invasion. But you might want to. Might help you understand what happened. Clara looked at the journal, her heart pounding. A window into Rebecca's thoughts. Into the darkness James hadn't seen. Thank you for trusting me with this. We're partners, Clara. That means honesty, even when it's hard. He closed the chest gently. Now, let me show you the barn before dark. You should know what you're getting into with the ranch work. The first week passed in a blur of learning and adjustment. Clara woke before dawn to the sound of James moving through the house, quiet and efficient. She cooked meals that grew more ambitious as she learned what ingredients the general store carried. She collected eggs from chickens who regarded her with deep suspicion, and she avoided the chest in the corner of her bedroom. Rebecca's journal sat there like a sleeping snake. Clara knew she should read it. James had given her permission, had even encouraged it, but something held her back. Once she opened that book, she'd know things, dark things, and knowledge, she'd learned, came with responsibility. On the 8th day, a storm rolled in. Not snow yet, though James said it was coming. Rain that turned everything to mud and made outdoor work nearly impossible. They were in the barn checking on the horses when it started. A downpour so sudden and fierce it was like the sky had split open. We're stuck here for a while, James said, settling onto a hay bale. Might as well wait it out. Clara sat across from him, listening to the rain hammer against the roof. In the close quarters of the barn, she could smell him, leather and horses and something earthy she couldn't name. Can I ask you something? She said. Always. What made you place the advertisement? After 2 years, why now? James was quiet for a long moment, his expression distant. Last winter, he said finally. I got snowed in for 3 weeks, had enough supplies. Animals were sheltered. Nothing to do but wait it out. And I realized I'd gone 5 days without speaking out loud. 5 days of complete silence. And I hadn't even noticed because there was no one to talk to anyway. He met her eyes. That's when I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I was turning into a ghost in my own life. So I placed the advertisement. Figured if I was going to have any chance at living again, I needed someone who could see me as I am now, not as I was with Rebecca. And what if I can't? Clara asked quietly. What if I'm not enough to pull you back? Then at least I'll have tried. And you'll have had 3 months to build a different life somewhere else with the money I gave you. The rain continued its assault on the barn, creating a cocoon of sound around them. I read her journal, Clara said suddenly. The words spilled out before she could stop them. Last night, I couldn't sleep and I read it. James went very still. And Rebecca was suffering, James. Long before the pregnancy, she wrote about feeling empty, about how nothing brought her joy anymore, about how she felt like she was disappearing, and she didn't know how to stop it. Clara's voice cracked. She wrote about the first baby, about how losing him broke something inside her, and about how you tried to help, but she couldn't let you in because she was afraid of dragging you down with her. Did she? James's voice was hoarse. Did she say why she went out in the storm? This was the moment. The truth that could shatter him or set him free. She wrote one last entry the morning of the storm. She said she was going to get the doctor because the baby wasn't moving right. She was scared something was wrong. But she also wrote. Clara swallowed hard. She wrote that if something happened, if she didn't make it, maybe it would be better. That you'd be free to find someone who could make you happy. James made a sound like he'd been punched. She didn't go out there to die, James. But she wasn't fighting very hard to live either. And that's not your fault. That's the sickness talking, the darkness she couldn't escape. Tears were streaming down James's face now, and he made no move to wipe them away. I should have seen it. Should have known. How? Clara moved to sit beside him. She was hiding it from you because she loved you, because she didn't want to be a burden. That's what the journal says over and over. I love him too much to let him see how broken I am. She took his hand carefully. You didn't fail her, James. The darkness failed her. This territory failed her. The isolation and the winters and the lack of a real doctor, all of that failed her. But you loved her the best way you knew how. James turned to her, his eyes red and raw. Why are you telling me this? You could have kept it to yourself. Used it as leverage or... Because partnership means honesty, Clara said firmly. And because you deserve to know the truth. All of it. He pulled her into a fierce embrace, and she held him while he shook with grief that had been dammed up for 2 years. The rain poured down around them, and two people who'd been carrying unbearable weight finally began to set it down. The storm lasted 3 days, trapping them in the house together. They talked more in those 3 days than they had in the entire previous week. Not just about Rebecca, though she was part of it, but about everything. James told her about growing up on a smaller ranch, about his father who'd taught him that land was the only thing you could truly count on, about the dreams he'd had for Eagle Ridge before tragedy struck. Clara told him about her mother's nursing work, about the medical knowledge she'd absorbed almost by accident, about her father's kindness before the debts, and the guilt she still carried for not being able to save her mother. On the third night, as they sat by the fire, James said quietly, I need to tell you something. Clara set aside her mending. All right. When I gave you that train ticket and the money, I meant every word. You're free to leave whenever you want. But, he took a breath. I'm hoping you'll stay. Not just for the 3 months. I'm hoping this becomes real. Clara's heart stuttered. James, I'm not asking you to love me. I know that's not part of our arrangement. But I am asking you to build a life here with me. Real partnership. Real commitment. It's only been 2 weeks. I know. And if you need the full 3 months to decide, that's fine. I just wanted you to know where I stand. Clara looked at him. This man who'd been honest from the first moment, who'd shown her his worst and asked for nothing in return except the same honesty. I think, she said carefully, that I'm already building a life here, whether I meant to or not. James's expression cracked open with something like hope. That night, Clara moved Rebecca's chest to the storage room, not hiding it, but making space for something new. Week 3 brought the first serious snow, and with it, a crisis that changed everything. Clara was in the kitchen making bread when she heard a strange sound from outside. Not the wind, not the animals, something else. She stepped onto the porch and saw a small figure stumbling toward the house through the snow. A child. James, she called, already moving. The boy collapsed just as she reached him. He couldn't have been more than 10 years old, dressed in clothes too thin for the weather. His lips blue with cold. Clara didn't think. She scooped him up. He weighed almost nothing, and carried him inside, her medical training taking over. Get blankets? She told James, who'd appeared at her shoulder. Warm water, not hot, and whiskey if you have it. She laid the boy in front of the fire, began stripping off his wet clothes. His skin was ice cold, his breathing shallow. Early stages of hypothermia, possibly frostbite on his fingers and toes. James returned with the supplies, his face grim. I know him, Samuel Hayes. His parents died of scarlet fever last spring. He's been in the territorial orphanage in Helena. He ran away. Clara wrapped the boy in dry blankets, began carefully warming his extremities. In winter, in a blizzard, he must have been desperate. She worked with calm efficiency, doing what her mother had taught her, monitoring his breathing, checking his pulse, gradually bringing his body temperature up without shocking his system. It took 2 hours, but finally, the boy's eyes fluttered open. Hey there, Clara said gently. You're safe. What's your name? Sam. His voice was barely a whisper. Samuel Hayes, ma'am. Well, Samuel Hayes, you're very lucky we found you. A few more minutes in that snow and… She didn't finish the sentence. Can you tell me why you ran away? The boy's face crumpled. They were going to split us up. Me and my sister. Send her to a different orphanage. Tears leaked from his eyes. I couldn't let them take her. I thought if I could get to my uncle's ranch near Eagle Ridge, he'd take us both. Where's your sister now? Still at the orphanage. I was supposed to get help and come back for her. But then the storm hit and I got lost and… His voice broke. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Clara looked at James, who was watching the scene with an unreadable expression. Samuel, James said quietly, your uncle's ranch was sold last year. He moved back east. The boy's face went blank with despair. Then I have nowhere to go. And Lily is still there waiting for me. Clara's chest ached. This child had risked everything for his sister, and now he had nothing. You'll stay here, she said firmly, before she could second-guess herself, until you're strong enough to travel. Then we'll figure out what to do about your sister. Clara, James said, his voice tight, can I speak with you? Outside? She followed him onto the porch, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the cold. We can't keep him, James said without preamble. We're not equipped for this. He's a child who almost died trying to save his sister. I know that, but Clara, we're not married. We're not even sure this arrangement is permanent. We can't take in a traumatized child on top of everything else. Why not? Clara's voice hardened. You told me this ranch has room, that we're partners. Was that just talk? No, but what? You're afraid? Because that boy in there is afraid too. He's terrified and alone. And he did something incredibly brave because he loves his sister. Are we really going to send him back to the orphanage after that? James's jaw worked. Clara, you don't understand. Rebecca wanted children so badly. We lost the first baby, and it broke her. The second pregnancy was supposed to be our second chance, and it killed her. I can't bring another child into this house and risk. He stopped, his breathing ragged. Risk what? Clara asked quietly. Risk caring about someone again? Risk having something to lose? This ranch is cursed, Clara. Everyone says it. Bad things happen here. Bad things happen everywhere, James. The question is whether we let fear stop us from doing the right thing. She stepped closer, her eyes fierce. That boy is dying inside, just like you were, just like I was. And we have the chance to give him something better. Not because we're perfect or because we have all the answers, but because we know what it feels like to be lost. James stared at her for a long moment, something working in his expression. You're not going to let this go, are you? No, 3 months, he said finally. He can stay for 3 months, same as our arrangement. After that, we'll see where we all stand. Clara wanted to argue for more, but she recognized compromise when she heard it. 3 months. They went back inside, where Samuel was sitting up, his eyes wide and wary. Samuel, James said, kneeling beside the boy, you can stay here for a while. We'll keep you warm and fed, and we'll see about getting word to your sister. But I need you to understand something. This is temporary. We're not your parents, and we can't make any promises about forever. I understand, sir. The boy's voice was small but steady. "Thank you for not sending me back right away." As Clara watched James help Samuel to the second bedroom, watched him settle the boy in with unexpected gentleness, she felt something shift in her chest. This man who claimed to be broken was still capable of kindness, still capable of choosing compassion over fear. That night, after Samuel was asleep and they were alone by the fire, James said quietly, "I saw what you did today, the way you handled the medical emergency. You saved his life, Clara. I did what anyone with medical training would do. No, you did what you were afraid to do 6 years ago. You didn't panic. You didn't run for help. You trusted yourself." Clara's eyes stung with sudden tears. "My mother would have been proud of you," James continued. "And I'm grateful you're here, not just for Samuel. For me." He reached across the space between them and took her hand. "I think we might be good at this, saving people, giving them second chances." "Even on a cursed ranch?" Clara asked with a small smile. "Especially on a cursed ranch. Maybe that's how you break a curse, by choosing hope instead of fear." They sat like that, hands linked, watching the fire burn down to embers. Two people who'd been running from ghosts, slowly learning that the way forward wasn't escape. It was facing the darkness together. Samuel Hayes settled into ranch life with the kind of desperate determination that broke Clara's heart and mended it in equal measure. He was up before dawn, shadowing James through morning chores. He learned to feed the horses, collect eggs, muck stalls, all without being asked. At night, he sat by the fire and wrote letters to his sister Lily in careful, precise handwriting. "Dear Lily, I found a place. It's not forever, but it's safe. The people here are kind. Mr. Blackwell is teaching me about horses, and Mrs. Ashford makes bread that tastes like home. I'm going to figure out how to get you here. I promise. Your brother, Sam." Clara read the letters with Samuel's permission, and each one made her more determined to find a solution. The problem was simple. Samuel was 10 years old. His sister Lily was 8. The territorial orphanage wouldn't release Lily to anyone who wasn't family and Samuel's uncle. The only family they had left was gone, unless someone adopted them. Clara broached the subject carefully one evening after Samuel had gone to bed. "We could petition to adopt him," she said, not quite looking at James, "and his sister, together." James set down the ledger he'd been reviewing. "Clara, I know what we said. 3 months, no commitments. But that boy is working himself to exhaustion trying to prove he deserves to stay. And his sister is still at that orphanage, waiting. We're not even married. We could be. You said yourself you wanted this to become real. Well, here's real. 2 children who need a home. A partnership that could become a family." James stood, began pacing the small room like a caged animal. "You don't understand what you're asking. This ranch has taken everything from me, Clara. My wife, my child, 2 years of my life. And you want me to bring 2 more children into it? To risk? To risk what?" Clara stood too, her voice sharp. "To risk caring? To risk building something that matters more than survival? To risk losing them?" The words burst out of James like a wound opening. "I can't go through that again. I can't watch another person I care about die in this godforsaken place. So you'd rather live half a life? You'd rather let fear make all your decisions? That's not fair." "None of this is fair, James. Rebecca's death wasn't fair. Samuel and Lily losing their parents wasn't fair. But we don't get to choose what's fair. We only get to choose what we do next." Clara stepped closer, her eyes burning with intensity. "That boy out there believes in us. He believes we're going to save his sister because we saved him. And I'll be damned if I'm going to prove him wrong just because you're too afraid to try." "I'm not afraid." But James's voice wavered. "I'm practical. Realistic. You're terrified, and I understand why. But James, listen to me, you didn't fail Rebecca. You didn't cause this ranch to be cursed. And you're not going to fail these children if you give them a chance." She took his hands, forced him to look at her. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But we could do this. Together. We could give Samuel and Lily a real home. A real family. Isn't that worth the risk? James stared at her for a long moment, his expression raw and vulnerable. What if I can't protect them? What if something happens and... Then we'll face it together. That's what partnership means. Something broke in James's expression. Not shattered, but opened. You really want this? A husband who's still grieving his first wife, 2 traumatized orphans, and a ranch that half the territory thinks is cursed. I want a life that matters, Clara said simply. And this matters. James pulled her into his arms, held her tight enough that she could feel his heart racing. All right, he said into her hair. All right, we'll do it. We'll get married. We'll adopt Samuel and Lily. We'll build a family out of all this broken. Clara felt tears on her cheeks and didn't bother wiping them away. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We haven't told Samuel. They told him the next morning. Samuel stared at them across the breakfast table, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. You want to adopt me? And Lily? Yes, Clara said, if you'll have us. But you're not even married. We will be, James said, as soon as the Reverend can arrange it. And then we'll petition the territorial court for adoption. Both of you together. Samuel's eyes filled with tears. You mean it? This isn't just, you're not just being kind until you can send me back? We mean it, James said firmly. You're ours now, Samuel Hayes. You and your sister both. The boy launched himself at James, wrapped his arms around the man's waist and sobbed like his heart was breaking and mending all at once. Clara watched James freeze for a moment, unpracticed at this kind of affection, uncertain how to respond. But then his arms came around Samuel, and he held the boy like he was precious, like he was family. They married on a Tuesday in late November in Reverend Clayton's small church with Samuel as witness and Ruth Calloway's family in attendance. Ruth had become an unexpected ally. The older woman had sought Clara out after church one Sunday, her expression a mix of grief and determination. I need to tell you something, Ruth had said. About Rebecca? She told Clara the truth then, that she'd been the last person to see Rebecca alive, that Rebecca had confessed her despair, and that Ruth had believed her when she said she was going to the doctor. I should have stopped her, Ruth said, tears streaming down her weathered face. Should have gone with her, but I thought she'd be fine. It was just 2 miles. It was 8 miles in a blizzard, Clara said gently. And Rebecca made her choice, Ruth. You couldn't have known. I've carried that guilt for 2 years, watching James suffer, believing I could have prevented it. Then let it go, Clara said firmly. Rebecca wouldn't want you to carry that. She'd want you to help us build something new. Ruth had pulled Clara into a fierce embrace, and from that moment, she'd become their fiercest advocate in Eagle Ridge. Now, as Reverend Clayton pronounced them married, Clara looked at James and saw not the ghost-haunted man she'd met 6 weeks ago, but someone starting to live again. They kissed chastely and Samuel cheered, and Ruth dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Afterward, there was a small celebration at Ruth's ranch. The community of Eagle Ridge had slowly warmed to Clara, drawn by her competence, her kindness, and the way she'd brought James back from the edge of grief. You're good for him, Ruth said, pressing a jar of preserves into Clara's hands. Don't let anyone tell you different. Even though some people think the ranch is cursed, especially because they think it's cursed, the best way to break a curse is to fill a place with love. That's what you're doing. The adoption process took 3 months. 3 months of paperwork and interviews and waiting while Samuel wrote letters to Lily every single day, promising her it was almost time. In January, they received approval. James and Clara drove the wagon to Helena through bitter cold. Samuel bundled between them, vibrating with barely contained excitement. The territorial orphanage was a grim building, functional but loveless. Inside, children sat in neat rows, their expressions carefully blank, and then Samuel saw her. Lily! A small girl with blonde braids looked up, her eyes widening. Sam! They collided in the middle of the room, holding each other like drowning swimmers finding shore. "I told you," Samuel said fiercely. "I told you I'd come back. I knew you would." Lily's voice was muffled against her brother's shoulder. "I knew." Clara felt James's hand find hers, squeezed tight. The matron brought Lily's belongings, a small bundle that held everything an 8-year-old owned. As they prepared to leave, Lily looked up at Clara and James with huge, uncertain eyes. "Are you really my new parents?" Clara knelt down to the girl's level. "Yes, if you'll have us. And Sam gets to stay too." "Sam absolutely gets to stay. You're a family. That doesn't change." Lily considered this seriously. Then she nodded. "Okay, I'll be your daughter." As they drove back to Eagle Ridge with 2 children in the wagon bed, whispering and laughing and planning, Clara felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Pure, uncomplicated joy. Spring came, and with it, a discovery that changed everything. Clara had been feeling unwell for weeks. Nausea in the mornings, exhaustion that went bone deep, a strange sensitivity to smells. She dismissed it as stress from the adoption, from learning to be a mother to 2 grieving children. But when her monthly courses didn't come, she knew. She was pregnant. The knowledge filled her with equal parts elation and terror. She thought of Rebecca, of the darkness that had consumed her, of the baby who died breech in a blizzard. She thought of the curse people whispered about, and she was terrified. Clara didn't tell James right away. Instead, she went to Ruth. "I need to know everything," she said, "about Rebecca's pregnancies, about what happened." Ruth told her about how Rebecca had become withdrawn during her first pregnancy, how she'd lost the baby at 6 months and fallen into a darkness she never truly escaped, about how the second pregnancy had seemed different at first, hopeful, but how Rebecca had become increasingly agitated as her due date approached. She was convinced something would go wrong, Ruth said quietly, and maybe that belief made it so, or maybe she just knew her own body better than any of us realized. "I'm pregnant," Clara said. Ruth's face lit up with joy, then immediately clouded with concern. "Does James know?" "Not yet."
I'm afraid, Ruth."
"What if I can't handle it? What if the darkness comes for me too?" Ruth took Clara's hands firmly. "Listen to me, child. You are not Rebecca. You have medical training. You have a strong mind. And you have James, who won't make the same mistakes twice. You're going to be fine. You can't know that." "No, but I can believe it. And so can you." That night, Clara told James. They were sitting on the porch watching Samuel teach Lily how to whistle, when Clara said quietly, "I'm going to have a baby." James went absolutely still. "You're certain?" "Yes." He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "How do you feel?" "Terrified. Happy. Terrified." "Me too." James took her hand. "Clara, I need you to know something. If anything goes wrong, if there's ever a choice between you and the baby, you come first. Always. Do you understand?" "James, I mean it." His voice was fierce. "I lost Rebecca because I didn't prioritize her. I won't make that mistake again. You are my priority. You and Samuel and Lily. This baby will be loved, but you are essential." Clara felt tears spill over. "Thank you." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the children play. Then Clara said, "There's something else. I've been having symptoms that Rebecca described in her journal. Pain in my lower back. Some spotting. I think I might have the same complication she had." James's hand tightened on hers. "What do we do?" "There's a hospital in Denver. Real doctors, modern equipment. If I go there for the last trimester, they can monitor me. Intervene if necessary. But it would mean leaving the ranch for 3 months. Leaving Samuel and Lily. Then we all go." "James, the ranch? The ranch doesn't matter. You matter. Our family matters." He pulled her close. "We'll leave Ruth in charge of the property. We'll take the children with us. And we'll make sure you and this baby are both safe. That's going to cost everything we've saved. Then we'll rebuild." "Clara, I almost lost you once when I wasn't paying attention. I won't risk it again." They left for Denver in June, when Clara was 6 months along. Ruth promised to manage the ranch with help from her sons. Samuel and Lily treated the journey as an adventure, their faces pressed to the train windows as the landscape changed. Clara carried one more thing with her, a letter from Mrs. Waverly that had arrived the week before. She hadn't opened it yet. Part of her was afraid that Boston would call her back, that guilt or obligation would pull her away from the life she'd built. But on the train, with James dozing beside her and the children playing cards across the aisle, she finally broke the seal. "Dearest Clara, I hope this letter finds you well and happy. I've written several times but received no response, so I can only assume you've found your place in Montana territory and chosen not to look back. I don't blame you, child. Sometimes the past is meant to stay buried. But I have news you deserve to know. Your father's business partner, Mr. Dennings, has been arrested. It seems he wasn't content with stealing from your father. He'd been defrauding investors for years. When the authorities investigated, they discovered Thomas Ashford was completely innocent. More than innocent, he was Dennings' victim. Your father's name has been cleared, Clara. The social disgrace you fled no longer exists. The Ashford estate has been restored, and there are considerable funds waiting for you if you choose to claim them. You could come home. You could live as a lady of means, with respect and comfort. I'm not writing to pressure you, only to give you the choice that was taken from you before. You deserve to know that you have options. With love, Margaret Waverly. Clara read the letter 3 times, her hands shaking. Everything she'd run from, the shame, the scandal, the poverty, none of it had been real. She could go back, could reclaim her father's name, her mother's social standing, could live in comfort and respectability. She could choose Boston, or she could choose Montana. She looked at James, at the man who'd offered her honesty when she had nothing, at Samuel and Lily, the children who'd become hers through choice rather than blood, at the swell of her belly, the baby who would be born into this family they'd built from broken pieces. Clara folded the letter carefully and tucked it away. She'd made her choice long before this letter arrived. Denver was overwhelming after months in Eagle Ridge. Tall buildings, crowded streets, noise and bustle that made Clara's head spin. But the hospital was clean and modern, staffed by doctors who took her medical history seriously. Dr. Sarah Morrison examined Clara thoroughly, then delivered her assessment with calm professionalism. "You have what we call placenta previa. It's the same complication that likely killed Rebecca Blackwell. The placenta is positioned low, which causes bleeding and makes natural delivery extremely dangerous." Clara's heart sank. "Then what?" "We monitor you closely. At the first sign of serious bleeding, we perform a cesarean section. It's a risky surgery, but it's your best chance. Both of you." "How risky?" Dr. Morrison met her eyes honestly. "I won't lie to you, Mrs. Blackwell. The maternal mortality rate for cesarean deliveries is about 30%. But without intervention, it's nearly 100%. And we're good at what we do here. Your odds are better than most. 30% chance of dying. 70% chance of survival." Clara thought of Rebecca, who'd had no odds at all, who died in a ranch house with no medical help, no options, no hope. "I'll stay," she said, "whatever it takes." The waiting was the hardest part. They rented rooms near the hospital. Samuel and Lily attended a local school, marveling at having classmates and books and a teacher who didn't have to split her attention between 40 students. James found work at a stable, mucking stalls and exercising horses to pay for their lodging. Every evening, he returned to their rooms exhausted but determined. "We're going to be fine," he said, night after night. A mantra, a prayer. And Clara read medical textbooks Dr. Morrison lent her, learned about anatomy and intervention, prepared herself for the possibility that she might not survive. In early August, when she was 8 months pregnant, Clara sat James down and gave him the letter from Mrs. Waverly. "I need you to read this," she said, "and I need you to know I've made my decision. But you deserve to know what I'm choosing." James read the letter in silence, his expression cycling through shock, confusion, and something that might have been fear. You could go back, he said finally. You could have everything you lost. I could, Clara agreed, but I'd lose everything I found. You, Samuel and Lily, the life we're building. And I don't want that life anymore, James. I want this one. Even if it's harder? Even if we're starting over with nothing? We're not starting with nothing. We have each other. We have land and a home and a family. That's more than most people ever get. She took his hand, placed it on her swollen belly. And we're going to have this baby. And we're going to go home to Montana. And we're going to prove that love is stronger than any curse. James pulled her into his arms, held her like she was everything. I don't deserve you. Yes, you do. And I deserve you. We both deserve a second chance. Labor came 2 weeks later in the middle of the night. Clara woke to pain and bleeding, knew immediately what it meant. James, get Dr. Morrison. He was dressed and gone in seconds, returning with the doctor and 2 nurses within minutes. Things moved quickly after that. The hospital, the operating room, James holding her hand while Dr. Morrison explained the procedure one more time. We're going to put you to sleep with ether, the doctor said. When you wake up, you'll either have a baby or, well, we'll do everything we can. Clara looked at James, memorized his face. If something happens, nothing's going to happen. But if it does, promise me you'll tell our daughter about me. Tell her I chose her. Chose all of you. Clara, promise me, James. I promise, but you're going to tell her yourself. The ether mask descended, and Clara's world faded to black. She woke to crying, not her own, a baby's. Clara's eyes fluttered open to find James sitting beside her bed, a tiny bundle in his arms, tears streaming down his face. You did it, he said, his voice broken with joy. You both did it. The baby is perfect, healthy, angry at the world. He carefully placed the infant in Clara's arms. Clara, meet your daughter. The baby was small and red-faced with a surprising amount of dark hair. She was screaming her displeasure at being born, and Clara had never heard anything more beautiful. Hope, Clara whispered. We'll call her Hope. Dr. Morrison appeared in the doorway, smiling. You gave us quite a scare, Mrs. Blackwell, but you're both going to be fine. The surgery went perfectly. As Clara held her daughter, felt James's hand on her shoulder, she thought about all the impossible paths that had led to this moment. Her father's death, the scandal, the train west, the cursed ranch, Rebecca's journal, Samuel and Lily, the choice to stay. Every loss, every difficult decision, every moment of fear. All of it had brought her here, to this hospital room in Denver, holding a miracle, to a family built not from blood, but from choice and courage and stubborn hope. They returned to Eagle Ridge in September, when Hope was 6 weeks old and Clara had healed from the surgery. The town turned out to welcome them home. Ruth had organized a celebration, and the house was filled with gifts, blankets and baby clothes and jars of preserves. We take care of our own, Ruth said, pressing a hand-sewn quilt into Clara's arms. And you're ours now. That night, after the visitors had left and the children were asleep, Clara and James stood on the porch with Hope bundled between them. I have one more thing to tell you, Clara said. About the money from Boston. James tensed. You don't have to. I'm donating it. Most of it, anyway, to build a medical clinic here in Eagle Ridge. A place where women don't have to travel 3 days to Denver for proper care. Where people can get help when they need it. She looked up at him. Rebecca died because there was no help available. I almost died for the same reason. This money can save lives. James, it can break the curse, not by magic, but by making this place safer for the people who live here. James stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her close, careful not to jostle the baby. You're remarkable. You know that. I'm practical, and I'm tired of losing people to preventable tragedies. Will you run the clinic? Eventually, when Hope is older. Ruth's daughter has nursing training. She can help in the meantime. But yes, I want to use what my mother taught me. I want to save people. Then we'll make it happen. Together. They stood in the gathering darkness, 3 people who'd survived against odds, surrounded by a family that had chosen each other. Inside, Samuel and Lily slept peacefully. Outside, the land stretched vast and beautiful and full of promise. And Clara finally understood what she'd been searching for when she answered James Blackwell's advertisement. Not safety, not security, but purpose. A life that mattered. A love built on honesty and partnership and the courage to keep choosing each other, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. 3 years later, the Eagle Ridge Medical Clinic opened on a bright spring morning, funded by the Ashford Trust and staffed by Clara Blackwell and Ruth's daughter Margaret. It was small, just 3 rooms, but it had clean beds, modern equipment, and most importantly, it was here, available, saving lives. Samuel, now 13, helped with basic care, changing bandages, comforting frightened children, learning medicine the way Clara had learned from her mother. Lily, 11, kept meticulous records and had announced her intention to become a doctor. A real one, she said, with a diploma and everything. Hope, 3 years old and fierce as a wildfire, ran through the clinic trailing her father, demanding to know what everything was for. And James had started teaching other ranchers about sustainable practices, about mental health, about recognizing when someone needed help. He'd become an advocate for the isolated families scattered across Montana territory, making sure no one else suffered alone the way he and Rebecca had. The curse, if it had ever really existed, was broken. Not by leaving, not by forgetting, but by building something better from the ashes of tragedy. One evening, Clara found James in what had been Rebecca's garden, now overgrown but beautiful in its wildness. "I come here sometimes," he admitted, "to remember her, to make sure I don't forget what I learned." "What did you learn?" "That love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, paying attention, choosing each other even when it's hard." He pulled Clara close. "Rebecca deserved better than I gave her. But because of her, I know how to love you better." "You love me perfectly," Clara said. "No, but I love you honestly, and that's enough." They walked back to the house together where their children waited, where dinner was warm and the laughter was real and the ghosts, while not forgotten, had finally been given permission to rest. Clara had come to Montana expecting survival. She'd found a life worth living, a family worth fighting for. A love that had grown from honest soil into something strong enough to weather any storm, and every day, she chose it again. That was the real miracle. Not that they'd survived the darkness, but that they'd learned to build something beautiful in its wake. Thank you for journeying with Clara and James from desperate beginnings to hard-won happiness. Their story reminds us that the most powerful love stories aren't about perfection. They're about 2 imperfect people choosing each other, again and again, even when the path is difficult. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more emotional frontier tales where broken souls find healing and second chances lead to extraordinary lives. What resonated most with you? Clara's medical calling? James's journey through grief? Samuel and Lily's courage? Share your thoughts in the comments. I love hearing which moments touched your heart. And remember, sometimes the life we build from ashes is more beautiful than anything we lost to the fire. Until next time, may you have the courage to choose the life you truly want.